Marcus had barely settled into his routine in the new neighborhood when the storm arrived. It came in the form of the one woman nearly everyone had warned him about, the infamous Karen of the HOA. Her name wasn't really Karen. Dove. Of course, but it had stuck to her like a badge of honor because of her relentless, self-appointed crusade to keep the community perfect. She was the kind of neighbor who noticed if you put your trash can out 30 minutes early, who measured lawns with a ruler to ensure the grass blades didn't dare rise above HOA standards, and who had the uncanny ability to appear out of thin air the moment a car stopped too long in a driveway. Marcus had brushed off the rumors at first, chalking them up to exaggerated gossip, but he quickly discovered that Karen was not just a rumor, she was an active menace. And it didn't take long before she set her sights on his Jeep. The vehicle, a rugged black Wrangler that looked perfectly normal to the untrained eye, was more than just a car to Marcus. It was an operational unit tied to the police task force he worked with, fitted with specialized communication equipment and surveillance gear. Because of its sensitive contents, Marcus kept it locked inside his gated driveway whenever it wasn't in use, with a heavy-duty padlock securing the gate. To him, it was just common sense, protecting both his property and the task force's resources. To Karen, however, it was apparently an eyesore, military-style vehicle that she decided clashed with the neighborhood aesthetic. That hot summer afternoon, while Marcus was away at a briefing, she marched up the sidewalk with a set of bolt cutters she had borrowed from another neighbor under the guise of community improvement. Without hesitation and without permission. She clipped through the thick padlock as though she were cutting ribbon at a grand opening, muttering to herself about enforcing the rules and teaching people to respect the HOA. Metallic snap echoed down the quiet street, and Karen stood there triumphant, the broken lock lying useless at her feet. She then strutted into Marcus's driveway, clipboard in hand, circling the Jeep as if she were an inspector on official duty, jotting down fabricated infractions that she no doubt planned to wave in front of the HOA board as evidence of Marcus's supposed crimes against the community. What she didn't realize, what she couldn't have imagined, was that she had just crossed a line far beyond petty HOA politics. Not only had she trespassed onto private property, she had tampered with a vehicle that belonged to a law enforcement task force, an act that, if reported, could carry serious legal consequences. But Karen wasn't thinking about consequences. She was thinking about power. In her mind, she was the guardian of the neighborhood, the gatekeeper who kept everything pristine, and this Jeep, with its tinted windows and rugged build, was a challenge to her authority. So she scribbled on her clipboard with smug satisfaction, circling the vehicle again and again, glancing around as if expecting the applause of invisible neighbors. The scene would have been almost comical if it weren't so invasive. A woman with a plastic visor to block the sun, white sneakers squeaking on the pavement, strutting like she owned the place, all while standing in a driveway that wasn't hers, beside a vehicle she had no right to touch. That broken padlock on the ground, small and insignificant as it seemed, was more than just metal lit, was the symbol of a line Karen had crossed. It's one that would soon turn her routine power plays into a confrontation she couldn't talk her way out of. When Marcus pulled into the neighborhood later that afternoon, he immediately sensed that something was off. The broken padlock lying just inside his driveway was the first clue, glinting in the sunlight like a warning. His eyes narrowed as he parked, stepping out of his car to find Karen pacing around his Jeep, clipboard in hand, scribbling furiously, as though she were conducting an official investigation. She didn't even flinch at his arrival. In fact, she greeted him with a smug smirk, as if she had caught him in some grand violation. "This vehicle is not authorized to be stored here," she announced without preamble, pointing her pen at the Jeep, as though she were a judge handing down a sentence. Marcus held back a laugh, though his jaw tightened as he noticed the bolt cutters resting against her leg, their blades still gleaming from their fresh bite through his lock. "You broke into my property?" he asked evenly, his voice calm but edged with steel. Karen scoffed, waving away the accusation. "It's not really your property when it affects the community," she said confidently, quoting some imaginary bylaw as if it gave her the authority to trespass. She launched into a speech about aesthetics, community standards, and compliance, all while circling the Jeep like a vulture circling prey. Marcus let her ramble for a moment before interrupting, his tone measured. That's not just a Jeep. That's a task force vehicle. You've just tampered with government property. The words landed like a brick on Karen's face. Her smirk faltered, replaced by a twitch of disbelief. Government property? She repeated, her voice cracking slightly. Don't be ridiculous. It's just a car, and it doesn't belong in this neighborhood. But before Marcus could respond, headlights flashed at the end of the street. An unmarked black SUV rolled up, pulling smoothly to the curb. Two men stepped out, both in plain clothes, but with the unmistakable posture and presence of law enforcement professionals. They approached Marcus with a nod, greeting him by name, before glancing at the broken lock on the ground and the woman still clutching her clipboard. It took less than 30 seconds of explanation for them to understand what had happened. Of them crouched down, examining the cut lock, while the other fixed Karen with a look so sharp it seemed to slice through the hot summer air. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "do you realize that tampering with law enforcement property is a serious offense? This isn't an HOA matter, it's a federal crime." Karen's face drained of color, her bravado shriveling in the heat of reality. She stammered something about community rules and unsightly vehicles. But the officers weren't interested in her excuses. They warned her in no uncertain terms that her actions could result in charges of trespassing, destruction of property, and interference with a law enforcement operation. For the first time, Karen had no comeback, no smug remark, no imagined bylaw to wield. She stood there frozen, her clipboard hanging limply at her side, as if it had suddenly become too heavy to hold. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't need to. The sight of her being escorted back to the sidewalk, her steps hesitant and her mouth shut tight, was more satisfying than any sharp retort he could have delivered. The neighborhood grapevine worked faster than wildfire. Within hours, everyone knew what had happened, and Karen's reign of petty terror had been dealt its first real blow. From that day on, Marcus's Jeep sat untouched in his driveway, its black frame gleaming under the sun like a quiet reminder that power doesn't always belong to the loudest voice. Sometimes it belongs to the one who doesn't need to shout at all because the law already speaks for him.